Welcome to Flooring Models Kit Review time. Today we've got something a little bit different. Shaken, definitely not stirred. So down here we've got the Robart Paint Shaker. Now, we've spoken about these a lot, and when we say a lot, we mean a hell of a lot recently here on Flooring Models, because recently I went out and got one of these. Okay, so this is the Badger paint stirrer. Okay, nothing wrong with it, it works great, and I must admit I've been singing its praises ever since I bought it. Now for years, and when we say years, we're talking my entire modelling career, which professionally is 20 years, plus, you know, just doing it as a bit of fun, I never bothered with one. To the point where I used to tell everybody they're a bit of a waste of money, you can just use a brush and away you go. And then I actually use one, and it's one of those things where you think you know best and actually you know nothing at all. Hands up, I can eat humble pie, I was that person. Because I can honestly say, since using this little guy here, my paint, airbrushing especially obviously, has improved tenfold easily. Now the thing is, what you're actually doing is mixing up the paint properly. When you're just giving it a shake, you're still going to get lumps in there, perhaps lumps and bumps, things like that. You put it into your airbrush, it goes down to the business end, gets to that very tight little needle nozzle set, and then it spits because it gets lumps and clogs up and everything else like that. By making sure your paint is as smooth as it can be and the consistency right the way through is non-changed, what happens is you'll get a far better airbrushing experience. So all those times you get stopping and starting, spitting, clogging, just gives up. That's what 9 times out of 10 it's going to be, is your paint mix. Okay, so investing in something to get that paint properly mixed up is pretty much a must. So as I say, I bought the Badger paint mixer. You could probably use anybody else's. It's pretty much a generic OEM product, but basically you pop this guy in and you go for it. It mixes it up, and it is using a pure mixing sort of motion like that. Not cheap for what it is, because let's face it, it's a coffee frother, but at the end of the day, it's one of those tools where, from my point of view, it's priceless because it's helped my airbrushing right the way through. Now, this started the small little debate going out there because obviously you can get a shaker. So what is the difference between shaking and stirring? Technically, it's more of a preference thing, although I do have my own opinion, which we'll speak about at the end. Technically, what we've got just down on here is the Robart Paint Shaker. Now this has, as you can see, a little rubber pad on it, like here, and it has in here a little motor. It's obviously offset. So what happens is it physically vibrates your paint and everything else like that. So what you do, if I just grab a bottle of paint, you just pop this little guy in like this. You have this, and this is rubber, so obviously it's going to stretch, and obviously you can get in here huge, great things to quite small things, okay? And all it has is these two little hooks just down on here. This will then hold securely, and because it's rubber, it's not going to fall out. Okay, and you have an on-off switch here. Now technically they do this in a few different flavors. You can have a battery powered one, you can have a mains powered one, and obviously different voltages. Now from my point of view, if I've still got this plugged into the right one, lost my cable. Okay, so what we got down here, it's a standard DC 12 volt, and this is mains powered. So we just plug it in the back here, and then we go for it. And as you can see, it's not just shaking side to side, it's doing it all round, everywhere. And actually, it's quite a strong motion. It's quite loud, but hopefully you can see from the different angles of how this is going. Good job of doing this at 60 frames. It's quite noisy. You have to wait quite a while for it to do its bit as well. I'll turn it off for the moment. And obviously if you've got like a steel or a stainless steel agitator in there, i.e. a ball, a nut, whatever it is, it's going to work even better because that's going to be flinging around in there and all the things. But all too often what can happen is, especially with Vallejo paints, down in here, these just don't mix properly. And as you can hear, I've got a little agitator in there as well. But what you're going to do is basically just pop in this little guy in and you give it a mix. And you would leave it in here for as long as it takes. So it might take 30 seconds, it might need a minute. Personally, I have no idea. That's the only trouble with this type. But you know, you can get industrial versions of this. You've probably seen them. You can get them down obviously your local paint centres, things like that. They actually have a giant version of this where they pop it in and it shakes the hell out of it to totally mix up the colour. Now this is where the old James Bond thing's going to come in here. Shaken or stirred. That is going to be your preference. For me, I don't know yet. I've never really used the shaker. The only thing with the shaker is it's going to be quite hard to know if it's done it enough. At least when you're mixing it, you can look at it and you can see exactly what's going on. But to show something a little bit more, interesting, I thought we'd have a go using MRP paints. Now the MRP paints, you can see, because these are a lacquer, you can see how they've separated, and you see that gorgeous pigment at the bottom. So this will give us a very good idea of how quickly this mixes up by popping one of these in. So again, we'll just pop this round in here, making sure it's held securely. So now we'll be able to see properly how good this actually is. All right, so let's just give this a go. There's a lot more movement going on here because of the size. And you can probably see as well as I can, it's doing it, it's going. And I know what you're wondering now, what colour is this supposed to be? And the ones who know, this is that Russian internal cockpit colour. So we're just going to sit it here for just a moment. And this is one of those things, how long do you literally give it? Okay, so you might be able to see we have got some play just coming in the back end here. You can see the little bit of amount of paint moving just down in the back there. Let's go again. So you see we've still got quite a bit going down on here, and the colour is starting to change, as you can see, right the way across here. But I must admit, I'm thinking using the mixer would be a lot quicker. So just talk amongst yourselves. I'm just looking for another colour that's very similar, so we can do a joint type of contest between the two. This is probably as good as we're going to get. Bored now. Right, okay, so let's have a quick... Now, it is doing it, don't get us wrong, but honestly, it's going to take a while. So, I would try Old Faithful, the mixer, okay? So, I know I'm not going to obviously be able to show you this at the same time, but I'm not going to... So really, this is your choice. This one's particularly difficult. Just trying to get this all out without spraying everywhere. Put that to the side. Let's put the lid on. As you can see, it has mixed it. It's still down there though. I don't think it's got totally rid of it. And this has got a metal ball in here as well. I'm thinking this is probably not a very fair test for this poor thing because it is very, very heavy duty down colour. But you can probably see you've got different colours down in here. This is where it takes a little bit of a long time. I'll tell you what, we'll call it quits on that because I think that's really heavy duty. Let's try this one. So this has got a nice mixture of different colours in here. And again. So this should turn out green in theory, because it's all green. And you can see it's actually going green, so that's a good sign. So yeah, we're doing alright now, we're turning green. You can see the red down at the bottom is starting to dissipate as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the angle a little bit as well, so it's not all pooling up on one side. If that makes sense. So it looks like the oscillation is just sideways. It's just literally doing this continuously. But again, it may be that I'm just being a little bit too fast with it, that you might want to leave it for a few moments, well, minutes, about 3-4 minutes in here to completely do its bit and make its way through. But the trouble that you always want to do with all your paint is make sure what's off the bottom is off the bottom. Now we've seen in this case it's particularly hard wearing down in here, and I'm sure if I left this in here even longer we'd have no problem with it. So we're just gonna let it go just another couple of moments. Okay, and there we go. That's a nice, good, solid colour all the way through. Got a tiniest little bit down at the bottom there, but I think by the time you then come in and just give this a, there we go, it's going now, look, a bit of a shake, it has gone wrong, got rid of it all totally. So there we go, that's not too bad at all. Okay, I'm going to pop this back in here, and then I'm just going to leave it for a couple of minutes. Just to see what it does, see if it does any more to break up that bottom pigment. Downside to this particular one, as we know, sorry, can't do it at the same time, this rubber bit will break. Okay, so yes, you could just use rubber bands in there and everything else. And to be honest, Hans has got one of these and he's been using it for years. And as he said, eventually they do give up. Okay, so they are going to break. It's doing a very violent motion all the time. So you're almost expecting it to fail at some point, because purely because it just cannot keep up that amount of violence all the time as it makes its way through. A lot of this is like airbrushing we were speaking about recently. There is no right and wrong to this. At the end of the day, if it's mixing paint thoroughly, evenly, and giving you great consistency with your airbrushing, that is what's going to help as you make your way on with actual or airbrushing in general. The thing is, what's the difference between using one of these and one of these? Again, it's personal choice. I know people who love using one of these, a paint shaker. They say you get a better paint finish than you do with a mixer. Personally, the jury's out. I haven't been doing this long enough, and I certainly haven't been using a paint shaker to be able to actually comment on if a paint shaker is any better than actually a stirrer. Okay, so it'd be great to hear your feedback. You guys who've been doing this a long time, do you have a personal preference? Can you give me the pros and cons to these? Obviously, if you're on Facebook, on Twitter, things like that, post up on there and we can actually get some good feedback and advice to anybody who might be thinking about getting one of these. Generally though, it's very hard for me to do a full review about what it's doing and everything else, because yeah, it is doing it. And it is shaking it lovely and shaking it all about. The only thing is, it's a bit noisy and it's a little bit long-winded. I think you would probably need to leave your paint in there for a few minutes to do it. That's the great thing with this though, it's main powered, you haven't got to worry about batteries going or anything else like that. It's just a straightforward 12-volt system. It's just taking a little bit of time to get going, but that said, it's starting to do it now. I'm just going to turn it through this angle. I can imagine this rubber band breaking, going brittle very, very quickly. But we're just going to leave it in here just to dissipate the end. The great thing about these though is that you can actually work with pretty much any size bottle on here. So we'll test it in a moment with some different size bottles, but I'm pretty much imagining anything would really fit in here with no problem at all. So there we go, we'll just call it quits there. It's just got a little bit still to go, but it is doing it now. You can probably see there at the bottom, it's starting to go, but you can see we've got a nice solid colour right the way through. So let's just have a go with some different size bottles. So first up, let's just stick in here. This is a thing. This actually totally comes off, so you can fit it at any size you actually want. So this is quite a large bottle. This is an AK bottle going on there. So that shakes up that with no problem at all. Obviously the standard Tamiya bottles we know will fit. Let's just get something a little bit bigger just to test it to the maximum. Okay, so very nice, no problem with that. Okay, so that's dry. This is probably the biggest bottle I've got. Just generally hanging around here, and you can see on there I've still got one tooth as well, so you could probably go even bigger than this. But as you can see, the bigger the bottle, the heavier it is, the more that's struggling. That's struggling, but it's still doing it. I'll just be a little bit worried about it over time. I think that's probably a lot of pressure down on there. But that is a 60ml bottle trying to go in there like that. And just out of interest, because I've got here, you might see this is the clay wash that's been hanging around for quite a while. This is our light wash. This will be a bit of a test for it as well, if I can get it on. Okay, so in there. Just give it a good old mix up absolutely everywhere. I have to say, that's actually quite nice. It's done a good job in there. Mix that up, very nice indeed. A couple of little bits in the bottom, but I think another few moments in there would have done that absolute treat, so no problem with that at all. So there we go. At the end of the day, this is just one of those things. It's a quick to show you really what it is. Paint Shaker, I can highly recommend it, absolutely, because anything that is going to improve your paint and obviously your airbrushing experience is worth its weight in gold as far as I'm concerned. There's so many different variables with airbrushing and painting and things like that, that if you can get around that very early one, i.e. a good mix of paint, will pay off dividends later down the road, because obviously you're going to enjoy the experience more, and also you're going to get a better colour onto your model, because if you've got half the pigment and stuff like that is still down here in the bottom of your actual paint, you're not putting it onto your model, so that's going to affect your mixes, your ratios, right the way down to your actual color scheme on your model as well. So having a good mixer is definitely the way to go. I do have to thank, this is from one of my members who sent me this as a little bit of a Christmas present. I can see myself using it, absolutely. I don't think it's a problem. It's nice that it's main powered, so you've always got a battery. You don't have to worry about it being flat or anything else like that, so that way you can just plug it in. It would have been nice, to be honest, to get a couple more extra of these. I don't think it's a problem, because if it did go wrong, you could just stick a rubber band around it. But these here, I'm sure you can buy some more. It's just, it's very handy, but it would have been nice in the pack to have a few of them, because I can imagine them over time, you know, they're getting brittle and they'll pop and shred and everything else like that. So that's one downside to it. Again, personal thing, you guys give me your feedback if you loved it, if you hate it, if you think it's worth the money, if you think it's a useless, if you prefer shaking or stirring, it's up to you.